Hi, and welcome to the Fierce Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Brigette Gildemaster. This is a podcast for those who are ready to leave behind survival mode after abuse, where we talk about what it looks like to embody who you are as an individual, learn to love yourself, and bring to light healing after surviving abuse from relationships and religion. Pop your earbuds in to hear heartfelt and powerful intensity from myself and guests. Be ready to put into place actual tools and gather insight for you to use on your healing journey. Hello, and welcome back to the Fierce Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Brigette Gildemaster. Today, I have a guest with me, Rimsha, and I'm so happy to have her here. We met on social media, and she is like fire. Like, the stuff she posts, just the amount of emotion and feeling and just true passion behind everything she does just drew me in. And I have fallen in love with her, and I'm so excited to hear what she has to share today. And I know I'm going to be learning some things from her as well. So I will have you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to be part of your universal field that you're creating in your own world, It's such an honor. This platform is so great. And I also have a podcast, so I'm like, I love like merging different worlds together, and we're all doing such beautiful things for this planet. So really honored to be here. Thank you for giving me this space. Yeah, my name is Rimsha. I am a healer, and my work is very much into the shamana path, the feminine path, and how can we come back to the holy union and be whole on our own before we can ask for something outside of ourselves. And that is my path. And believe it or not, I love what you mentioned about that my emotional stories and the posts that I share is what kind of pulled you in, because oh my gosh, I was like so closed off most of my life, like a veil over me. Like I must hide. I was always extremely highly sensitive, and it was demonized, right? We live in a world where sensitivities are demonized. So it has been a journey for me to come back to wholesome. And that's the work that I do, teaching people and guiding them into the darkness, into the void, into the mystical realm so that they can find their own power, their own light. I'm not here to show you the light. You already have it within you. I'm just here to kind of hold space and be that masculine container for you to access that within, because we don't need to walk this path alone. We can collaborate and co-create and be supported on our journey. And that has been my path. And I went through really, really, really traumatic experiences. I love the way people, when they find my story now, they're like, you probably should not even be alive. And that's how deep and dark that journey was, that I really shouldn't be. And yet, not only have I found my way out of the traumatic state, I've also created some beautiful things in a very 3D physical realm, right? Which is the gift of walking the spiritual path. It's like not just feeling good and peace, is to really be able to create that impact outside of you.
Mm. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's also beautiful. Like I love how you just made that so tangible. Like that's what I love about you. Like you just take it and you take this concept and you brought it into our reality. Like
Mm.
it's so beautiful. And yeah, just I thank you for being so brave to speak up after it all, because that is a healing journey in and of itself for
Mhm.
you and a process for you. And it's not, you're not doing it out of selfish or attention, because it is so hard. I speak with other creators all the time. They're like, why would I put myself through this for that? Why would you say that? And I understand how hard that is and what
Mm.
you've gone through to even get to that point of using your voice for others as well. So thank you for that, because that is huge.
It is a very intimate journey to even open your throat chakra. For thousands of years, women were, you know, quiet down. God forbid you show anything other than joy and submissiveness. So it has been a journey for me. And, I thank you so much for acknowledging my groundedness and like how I can explain in a tangible way, because I used to be such a floater, like like totally not here. English is not my first language, it's like my third language. So I was always struggle to finish my sentences. I like never really, I failed. I was an engineering student in college, failed English like 3 times. Horrible. I just, that my professor kept saying, complex ideas, you do not know how to convey them. And I feel like that's part of my purpose is to like take that really, really complex human experience and bring them in a way that can be digestible by all beings on earth. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, well, no, you speak English great. You speak it better than I do, probably. I fumble all over myself. So that is awesome. I love that even more. Like, I love that you've taken what someone, put you down for, and you're just like, no, I'm gonna show you this is what I can do with my voice. That's beautiful. So I
Yeah.
also love what you said about your emotions and feelings and having to suppress them. That is something that I have used a lot in my journey and realizing, oh my gosh, I had no emotion as a child. Like it was growing up in the religious circles we had, it was very much, you know, no emotion was good. Even happy really was an emotion I had to get comfortable with because, to express too much happiness made you weird, And so I just love how you touched on that too, how we can express and it is such a beautiful part of our humanity.
Yes. So I don't know what religion were you part of?
So I grew up would be Christian, but Reformed
Christian.
Presbyterian.
Okay.
So more of a very small thing
Mhm.
in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. I grew up, I was born and raised in Pakistan. And for those of you who don't know the environment, it is, I mean, it is still a very new country because of the colonization. We were pushed out. The Muslim community was pushed out of India, which is a very, very holy, sacred land. And this tiny little piece of land was divided and said, like, you are kicked out. And when I was born, it was only 50-year old, right? So this land is very new and holding on to a lot of trauma, and it's surrounded by war. So there's still a war going on our borders in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then Kashmiri war that's still going on. So me growing up in that part of the world as a highly, highly sensitive person, I took it all in. Like war was very, very intimate to my being. All I knew was violence, like true, true, deep violence. And it reflected my household where my father was extremely violent. I was used as a punching bag. And then you use like the suppressive, Islamic religion, which is beautiful. I do believe religions are so beautiful. They can be an anchor. They can be a faith can be a beautiful anchor. And yet, if the anchor suppresses you, then you must question it. If it empowers you, please stay, please follow through, please continue going on, right? But if the religion itself starts to feel, right, the embodiment of the religion starts to feel like a control and suppressive act, then you must question, where do you really belong? Because then you can come up with your own moral set and faith that can become your anchor, right? So for me it was growing up in this tiny little country that's only Muslim community. Most of my family got killed in the process of migrating to this land. um you know it was embedded in me. This is what we call ancestral trauma, and I didn't know. I was just that innocent young woman, like 6, 7 years old, who felt it all. And I questioned everything that was around me because everything felt so disempowering. And I'm also a psychic medium. I also can see things. I'm also my human design projector. So this is like being able to see through the darkness was at the time felt like a curse because I was dealing with a lot of, how do I say the word demonic without saying demonic? Okay, I will just say demonic. These evil, dark things around me, because it is a very low vibrational world. You go to Middle East, like in the places that seem the most low vibrational is also the place where like heavens are also direct. So let's talk about India, right? A lot of people know about India. They go there for their spiritual awakening. It is very well known for it, but the people there don't experience India that way. They are very, very surprised. It is a very low vibrational country with a lot of spiritual portals. So the bigger your light is, the bigger the shadows are. And I got to experience that within my own self, that it kind of reflects us as individual beings. Like those of us who walk the spiritual path, yes, you will expand your light so that you can heal the planet, but our shadows get just as bigger. And it's important to be wary of that. So that suppression of religion was such a key. And I'm sure you and a lot of your viewers, and also for me to kind of start questioning at the very young age of like 8 year old, this can't be it. Like that was my journey. Like this can't be it. And like really walking that path of figuring out, well, what is it? So that meant a lot of elimination of choices of what was even out there. In that tiny world, like my world was like for 14 years, like 2 minutes walk from my home to school, and that was it. I hadn't seen anything or knew anything. So very, very small world, and most people would just follow blindly because that's what we're designed to do, is survival.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I love what you just, I mean, there's a lot there, but I love what you just finished with too. And that what your reality is, what you see around you. And if that's all you know, is also so impactful. I see that. So I'm out in the Midwest, and so we're small town out here. And it's actually something I've noticed more and more is like you get into these smaller towns and there's more and more problems. There's such a small, because this is all they see. They can't see past this small little area into what the whole world holds for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's comfortable to
Mhm.
stay in that. And it's hard to say what is right or what is wrong. I do believe that all people are serving their purpose, even if it's blindly, even if it's unconscious. So we can have compassion for that. And those of us who are born to be here as guides and seers, like absolutely, you will be tested. So if you're going through the dark night of the soul right now, and if you're facing challenges and having a hard time finding your own truth, like you're part of the ascension of the planet. You're here to guide that in the next evolution, and that doesn't go without the trainings early on in your lives by facing challenge, like really hard challenges in our lives.
Yeah, so
Mm.
tell me, when did you come over to America?
I moved to New Jersey when I was 14 years old.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
2008.
Okay. So how
Mhm.
did that look for you on your journey? Where were you in your spiritual journey? You mentioned 8 years old. You started to see a lot. Like, how did that progress for you?
Wow. Yeah, 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 for sure. I would say I became extremely numb. I when we moved here, the world, it really fucked with me because it was like the States was what so I was born and my parents applied to come to the US. It took us 14 years to finally get accepted and come here, then an additional 5 years to become citizens. So it's the whole process, right? Of, to be liberated, to be free in a free nation. It's like, it's a process. And I'm very, very blessed for the resiliency that my parents had in order for us to come to this land. And then I had to walk my path of freeing myself from the shackles of my nervous system, only knowing what I had known for the first 15 years of my life, right? Just because you come to a land that's considered free does not mean you are free now. You're still living in a cage. You're still entrapped. So I, for the first time in my life, started to question how unsafe I felt. I felt, I mean, in Pakistan, it was purely survival. Every single day was survival. My body, my nervous system did not know joy, did not know celebration. It did not know what it felt like to feel contained and safe and all parts of me to be welcomed. And so coming here, it was like everything kind of started to come out. And I was also, my I started my period late as well. And so, my growth into the femininity was slower because of the lack of knowledge. I mean, I didn't even know what period it was. I was 18 years old, didn't know how a human was born. That's how conservative that part of the world is. I knew nothing. And so it was very, very, very intense for me. And because of the intensity, I allowed it to be suppressed completely. And I met the numbing version of myself. And I became really lost in what most Americans get lost in, which is success, which is school, which is the paradigm of you must do great at this and you must do these activities and this. It was the first time I realized, like, oh my gosh, the kids are born here and they're doing like 5 different activities. Like, now if I have my kids, I would never get them involved in that way, because we're wiring them to perform, to live a performative life rather than an in tune life. But for me, when I came here, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never played sports, I've never done this and this and this. I was so far behind. I left my spiritual path and started to run and chase and trying to catch up with my peers. And God for I mean, I didn't even know English, so I'm like totally feeling fucked. Like, I was so smart and I'm like, I can't even understand what's happening in my math class, you know? I don't know what my teacher is saying. So it was a really long process. So just it was leaving one survival state into another survival state, because now you have to adapt to the language and the culture. So spirituality wasn't that present. But what I will share is that um when I was growing up in Pakistan, I was very much aware of the veil, right? The veil between the spirit realm and the 3D realm. And I could sense that there are rock beings, there are nature is constantly speaking to us. I felt very in tune with the spiritual realm, right? Which shouldn't be a speciality. It is the human norm. We have for thousands of years forgotten it. You know, shamans were the original, like far before Christianity. Shamanism was very much and present. It was women who were channelers, who were deeply connected to our bodies. You know, coming to the US, where women are very in their masculine, like go-getters, they're not realizing they're actually also in their survival, right? They're being told like you must perform at a certain level, and God forbid you feel. God forbid you do anything other than think and be in your head, right? So I fell into that culture of like, this is how you must perform. Men are, and of course, my nervous system was already wired for feeling like men are not safe. My father was not a safe man. The men around me were not safe. I have been a victim of a lot of sexual abuse as a child. So
Mm.
I knew that I had to fight and fight and fight to almost like become a man. So I was an engineer for a long time, and then I was in the Marine Corps as an officer, and in a very, very masculine world. And if you look at me now, it's like I feel like was that even real? Like, was that phase of my life real? You know? But it reflected my wounds. Um, so being here, like my spirituality was very much just like just in shock, and the household I was also living in again reflected what I grew up in. So these are the patterns. Like, no matter, you can get yourself out of situations physically, but like you got to rewire your nervous system and like really reprogram your entire system to adapt to the life you deserve. And for me, I didn't realize that my being did not know what safety was.
Mm.
And it did not know safety in the physical world. It did not know safety in the spiritual world. So when I did see, when I did connect to spiritual beings who would come into my life, or I would see trees communicating or the sky communicating, and I'm very, very connected. Now, I mean, I use this for my work, this is so blessed to have walked that path, but it fucking terrified me. It terrified me to be so out of the norm, which is being so deeply connected with Mother Earth, where I could hear her, I could feel her, I could sense it, and then I became the channel for it, where I was just like a walking chaotic bomb. Like, my tears were large, my feelings were large. So of course, when highly sensitive beings, their shadow side is the desire for numbness and addiction.
Mm.
And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like, if you feel a lot, and that's why we see the most sensitive people are also in the mental hospitals. They're being put into boxes. Like, I feel so deeply for them, because God forbid I was born and raised in the US, I would definitely be put into the hospital because of the experiences that I was having, right? I get visited by beings that are not even from this planet. And now, 10 years later, once I started to own my power, it was like, okay, clearly I can't run away from this. Let me dive into it. And when I dove into it head on, then I learned that I'm actually being communicated, and there is a purpose in place for me to why I went through everything that I did, including the numbing, including the addiction, including the getting lost, including the getting lost in the masculine world, so that I could want to have compassion for the rest of the humanity, and then to use our unique gifts, our unique medicine, to guide the rest of humanity to evolve in this process, because I'm not special in this, right? Like mediumship and being a healer is not, well, yes, it does. I mean, a shaman is a shaman. You're either have it or not. However, the gift to connecting to nature and connect to other people's feeling and energy is not a gift. It's we all have it. We're just forgotten it. I hope that answers your question. I just went.
Yeah. Oh, that and more. Like, yeah, I love, oh my gosh, there's so much in there and just so much that I think just, yeah. I didn't know which way to spin, but like so much you did where I think we can all relate to, especially coming out of trauma and our like our nervous system. And I'm huge into like nature and healing all of that and being connected and stuff too. And so everything you said kind of just spoke to me. And I think and like the addiction side of it in America where it's so easy to cover up with everything like we have at our fingertips
Hmm.
from whatever. And it just, yeah, everything you said, like, wow. Wow, girl. There's so much there. So what did you do? So like realizing all that and coming to it, what were the steps you took to heal your nervous system after all that?
I think before I would go into it, I would love to share a small story, because I think
Yeah.
it may resonate with a lot of the, it's not just a step by step. It's like what actually like made me question, like, okay, it's time to stop these behaviors, right? So I fell in love with this incredible man and married him, and turned out he was not so incredible. And I
Mm.
had my heart broken by a narcissist and just shattered in a million pieces. And it was the first time in my life I realized I didn't know unconditional love. And so, one, the gift of this relationship, for the first time ever, allowing myself to date and then marry, committing and then marrying this man, meant that for the first time in my life, I opened up my heart, because it was closed for so long. I was protecting, even when you're like numb, you're like protecting yourself. So, I definitely shamed myself during the process of it. But now when I go back, I'm like, I just hold that part of me that allowed that heart to be closed, because you're protecting yourself. You're protecting the little girl inside of you. And so having my heart broken was really the catalyst for me to question everything, because of how insanely painful it was. It was the kind of pain that, like, oh, I can no longer suppress it. So once the heart broke, it was the pain of, yes, him, and then also my father, my mother, the religion, the Marines, and the way I treated myself, all of that kind of just like came out. All of it. And it was a fucking mess. Like I looked around me and I remember being in my barracks and like seeing, oh my gosh, there's too much. I was very also suicidal most of my life, because again, the gift of numb is protection actually, right? And then once the numbing no longer works and you start having these explosive feelings of the deep suppressed trauma that you have, then it becomes so overwhelming that your body wants to give up and not be here, because that's why like most men are numb, right? Like I totally have compassion, because it's too hard, it's too difficult to feel and see and face it all, because for thousands of years we have not. Seriously, it's been two roughly 3,000 years since we've really allowed ourselves to be in our bodies and not just stay in our head where it's safe to just be rational, right? So that's where like it was a choice that I had to make. I hit my bottom of the bottom. It's like, okay, there's I can make a choice here, and I'm sure my mother would not like to attend my funerals, but I think it's time that I step into my truth. And when I did step in my truth, I did lose everybody, including my own mom and my dad,
Mm.
who parted from me, because I had to speak into the truth of like, I don't buy into religion. I believe in God. I love God, but I don't see it separate from me. Right. So I had to come in, I had to access my inner truth, and then slowly and gently come back into my body, which meant every time I access different parts of me, I had to face the reality it was also facing. So your throat chakra, for example, um, in all the places in my ancestral lineage, where they couldn't speak their truth and they were suppressed. My grandmother was married at 12 years old. I felt it, right? I felt it and I allowed myself to be surprised too. So started healing that part of me. It meant, creating my podcast. The podcast was very healing. Like whoever's out there, like you have, like just because everybody's doing it does not mean you should not. Because in the virtual world, you have so much space and take up space, which is actually finally it's time that we the people speak our truth and not let the people in quote unquote power to take control, because our voices have so much power. And my intention with this podcast and mine and every time I speak is to empower you, to remind you of your own wholeness. And no matter the political influence, the economical influence, you have the power to manipulate the field around you. We are energetic beings. So I teach and study universal laws. I understand the energetic world because once I had my heart broken, I opened up the gates and I said, whatever, whoever wants to communicate with me, I'm ready to hear it because I'm done. I'm done. And if it consumes me, it kills me, I'm fine with it. So when I did that, the shadow work started. I didn't know at the time it was called shadow work, but I faced it head on and I did a lot of healing on myself. At the time, I didn't know that there was a healing world. I didn't know there were people like me out there. So I took it upon myself to take care of me and hold space for me. And it was the first time I started to realize, 3 years looking back now, I was becoming the I was allowing my inner masculine for finally be not toxic, but really be a provider, a true stable provider for my inner feminine to be contained, for her to have that space held. And now my husband is a pure reflection. My current partner is a pure reflection of that inner masculinity, which is my inner masculine knows how to provide that grounded space for my inner feminine to express itself in any way possible. It has to start with you before you can ask your man or you can ask anybody else. And that is actually within you, right? So I bought a house. I like completely emptied my bank account. And I didn't know why I was felt called. I was going through my divorce and I was just felt called to buy a home. And I bought a home. And what I didn't know what I was doing was, for the first time in my life, being the support I needed as a child to be heard and taken care of. And in that home is really where I opened up the gates and allowed my rage to exist, my grief to exist, my joy to exist, my playfulness to exist, and my witchiness to exist, you know, and my sacred whore to exist. I allowed my every part of me to exist. And, now I can look back and that's what I was doing, but I didn't know. All I knew was that the moment I entered this home, I just felt safe to simply be fully. And I got to learn how to be in tune with my cycles, with my menstruation, with my luteal, my follicular. And it was like I started to really tap into my own magic and realize that these beings that communicate with me are simply my family, my guides who are guiding me through this process. And I also started to learn that my human design is a projector. So I'm extremely sensitive. And I realized that 90% of the things that I've felt my whole life was actually not mine. So I learned to like comb away the things that were not mine and bring back my wholeness, my energy back to my body and say, Mom, this is not mine. This is yours. Take it back. Like my father. And it was I would say the hardest thing I had to do, because we're also, again, believed to yeah, carry everybody's burden, especially as mothers. Like, yeah, carry it all for you. Like, good. And they glorify, you carrying burdens for others. And so I was energetically so heavy. I was looking older too. I look very young now. People like sometimes question if I'm 12 years old, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not a baby, but it's because I had to bring back that innocence that I had lost as a child. And that's what the process for me was. Like that home provided me the container. I was all alone. And I took the guidance of my spirit guides and I would go back into places, started to remember my childhood because I had forgotten it. There were so many suppressed memories. So I started remembering. And as I was remember, I allowed the emotions to exist. And then I would bring in healing through that. And, I had to, we call it soul retrieval work as a shop. In my work, what I do is like I help clients like go back into the parts of yourself due to trauma where you lost an essence of you, a literal soul piece of you, and then bring that back and integrate. And for me, it was innocence. My innocence was just not there. I didn't know how to smile. I didn't know how to be happy. I didn't know what that felt like to play. Now I have all these sisters that I get to just play with like little girls, and it's really magical. But I didn't have that. My life has changed so significantly since I've allowed myself to one get completely naked and strip myself of all that was no longer me, and stepping into choosing into who I can be. It is a choice. It's not, yeah, it's written in the stars, but it's also a choice. Like, who do we want to step into? And that was the path for me. And that house really was like that strong masculine stable provider for me to allow all parts of me to exist and like just feel deeply. I didn't realize how difficult it was to feel, and like access those gifts and then start feeling liberation like this. It was like, whoa, every time I allowed those cathartic emotions to be released, it was exactly that release. And I felt free. And I understood something about myself there. Like, oh my gosh, I've had this like tight jar with me this whole time that has had for like 25 years of my life. And I get to actually now start allowing it to like slowly but surely, again, you don't need to like explode into it. You can slowly, and that's why it's really important to work with healers and have somebody supporting you, whether it's a partner or a friend or a healer, to contain that chaos and like slowly work through it and gently. And then to answer your question, I'm like the fucking worst. You asked me a question, I went into completely something different. um
Totally
re-
fine.
Rewiring your nervous system. I started to study what was actually happening in the body. I was having a somatic experience on my own, but then when I understood the science behind it, I was like, oh my God, this is what's happening. This is what breathwork is doing. This is what plant medicine is able to do for me. This is what me allowing myself to have somatic experience has is not only freeing me, but also like I'm seeing external changes in my life, right? Because the primal brain, that which is like big giant piece of your brain, is like it's only there for your survival. So what it does is like whatever life you've lived the first 15 years of your life or 10, that's what it will perpetuate because now that's safe for it. So, for example, in my case, violence was safe. So, if there were good men around me, I rejected it. If there were violent men around me, especially narcissistic, I felt safe in that company. So, the primal brain doesn't know what you actually want. It only knows what has known the first 10 years of its life in the development process. So, I had to do a lot of rewiring of the primal brain to teach it that's not safe anymore, and what does safety feel like, and creating that within my body before I could even magnetize that king, that partner that I wanted. I had to like build it within myself and realize what is it that I like really, what does safety feels like, what does abundance feels like, what does joy feel like, and playful feel like, and then embodying it and creating an actual felt sense experience. And that's how the universe responds to that. The universe responds to energy. So you become the playful energy, it will, that's what you will receive, right? You become, you're in that energy of abundance. That's what you'll create around you. I hope that answers your question. Sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. Don't apologize. There's you're sharing so much. You're sharing so many just bits and pieces and golden nuggets that for me were things on my healing journey I would hear other people say and send me down this whole path of healing that I needed to go down. So yeah, no, you're doing amazing and thank you for sharing so much. And your personal testimony is even more powerful than a step-by-step process. So I really appreciate that. Like that's beautiful. So yeah. Um, so what would in all of that, in stepping into your own being in you and embodying that, how did that affect you? I know you said you had to walk away from your parents or they walked away from you. Um, how did that also affect you just as being a woman in your circles and what you knew? How did that impact your choices?
Yeah, I think everybody, and probably you can relate to this too. The moment you start walking that path, things start to shift pretty rapidly. So I had traveled all over the world at that point, and I had close relation with my family. And the moment I started to really like step into my truth without the judgment of the world that I'm like a walking unicorn, I the universe started to like clear out all these people who were no longer serving me, and turned out my
Mhm.
parents being one of them. You know, that was the hardest one for me. They pushed themselves out themselves, and it was so painful because I was so close with them. I had done so much healing work with them, shamanically and just deeply. And I do believe it's not the end for us. Like they're definitely gonna come back, but right now they're still scared of the power in the way that I stand in my truth. It is very triggering for them. I lost all my friendships, and watched the love of my life continue to cheat on me, and we went through our divorce. And um, there was, but what I will say is that, yeah, the choices that I made, the way I started to live and then speak and then share, altered my reality outside of me, including people leaving. What it did was, though, was create a spaciousness. It created a lot of void and spaciousness for what was actually meant to serve me to come in. Because when you like, you keep your life, you want to change yourself, but you're not ready to let go of the things that no longer serve you, right? That's the hardest part. Like when you're working with limiting beliefs, you have to actually let go of the belief before you can invite another belief in. You can't just say I hate myself, and I love myself at the same time. So one has to go in order for there to be a space for the other belief system to come in. So the way everybody left my life created a lot of spaciousness for my soul family to come in. And it was effortless. I did not have to do anything. I just sat back and lived in my truth and embodied that truth, and they walked right in. And I got to really step into my leadership, as well as call in my soul mom and dad, and people who like saw me and supported me, which I had never known. All I had known in my life was people who knew how to take care of the victim part of me. Oop, Rimsha's sad. Let me take care of her. Like everybody just wanted to take care of me, but nobody wanted to actually celebrate me. And I learned that pretty early on. Like, man, I think I deeply desire celebration. This is like a practice I do every single night now and morning. I just celebrate. I like claim all the celebrations, even if it's a small thing like, oh, that cup of coffee was just so refreshing. Like I celebrate that. Like it is in my bones to be in the celebratory frequency, which is so different, so far from the frequency of my lineage and what they have gone through. Do you think they can ever celebrate after what they've gone through? So that was like a huge, huge shift for, and I know it is, everything that you do, every healing work that we do, it affects 7 generations before and 7 generations after. So everything that I'm doing for myself and my community and the people in my circle, like it has like massive ripples. And for me, the celebration piece was absolute necessary. The joy piece was necessary because again, like you said, in religions, God forbid if you celebrate. God
Mhm.
forbid if you feel joy. Everything is like everything has to be sacrificial. Like you must sacrifice your life for this end result of heaven, when heaven is right here. It's an experience that's happening right here, right now, within your, human experience. So that was a big big shift in my life. And now every time I'm going through some yucky feelings and things start changing and shifting, I like fully welcome it. I fully welcome the yuckiness, because the death and the rebirth and the in between is like a cycle, especially as a woman. We go through every single month.
Yeah.
And so just honoring it rather than fighting, rather than fighting that, oh, I'm shedding all of this, I don't want to let go of it. It's serving you, it's serving the highest purpose for all. So that has been a huge gift for me to understand my own anatomy, right? And then also my spirituality and understanding, like, as if you start to wanting to evolve into, even in your business or in your relationship, there's going to be parts of you that must die.
Yeah, so I would love to touch on that more too, just for my audience too, because so I've seen so many women, and it's such a struggle after coming out of a toxic relationship, going right back into another one, because they didn't leave that time to heal and or know what to replace it with. Like I loved how you spoke about the void, and like, so how do you like talk about that for a little bit? Like, how do you sit with that
Oh,
void? How do
love
you
it.
heal that? How do you bring in the good stuff?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, for me personally, and I can guarantee for every single one of you out there who are dealing with this, that person is going to be your biggest medicine, biggest gift. And if you don't actually take the medicine, well, the medicine will be keep fed to you by different men or different women, right? It's a pattern. Why do we live in patterns, right? And for me, I realized this was so interesting. The moment like we parted, I started doing healing work on myself. But I started putting myself out there. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to like, be with people. And it was so interesting. Every single man I was attracting was a mirror of him. And that was a huge indicator for me to say, I have not done my work. So I went completely celibate and completely like, yeah, the void. And I asked myself, what was he here to teach me? Because he was my soulmate. He is my soulmate, right? He came here. You don't just fall in love with people just for nothing. So that person is there to give you a huge chunk of medicine as you have to them, right? And the pattern will keep repeating unless you can actually ingest the medicine and actually integrate. So for me, really sat with him, and forgiveness was just too hard. So I started to lean into what I have learned, right? So that was my first step. And I would just sit in with Word document and I would think about all the horrible things that he did. And then I asked myself, what did I do? How did I magnetize all that? What part of me actually believed that I was worthy of that kind of love? And I got to learn a lot about myself, a lot about what kind of love I believed that I was worthy of. One of the things being, um, I believed that love was a fight, a constant fight. I had to like fight for it and earn it. And I can't just have it, it can't just exist. I have to just constantly beg and beg for it. Right. And and I also realized that he was a pathological liar. So he lied a lot. He was very, very good at lying. But I asked myself, what part of me he is mirroring? And I was like, I'm not a liar. There's no way. How could I be with somebody that lies so much? And boom, I realized I have been lying to myself my whole life. I may not be lying to him, but I was a liar. I had no integrity. I was lying to the most important people in my life, my parents, and hiding behind a veil, behind a uniform, and behind the words of God when I like totally didn't believe in any of this stuff. That was not my moral ground. So, of course, I attracted a partner who was so good at lying because he was the exact mirror for the way I was so good at lying to myself. So, everything he did to me, I made it about myself, including his abuse. It was like, man, I know that he has never hit anybody before. Why is he so violent towards me? And it was like, well, that's all I had known, with my father. So of course I magnetized that. So I really got to dig in. And it helps to journal. So you can journal, you can like have your phone recorded and write about every yucky thing you've experienced with that partner. And honestly, if you're living in a pattern with like several men in the past few years, go over every single one of them and you'll find common denominators, and they have nothing to do with the man. They have all to do with you. And here's the empowering thing about that. If you are the perpetuator of the pattern, that means you can also stop it. That means that once you look at it, once you embody it and feel it and work through it, you will see the external world will change. In fact, your husband, actually, if you're married to somebody who you might not jive with yet and you're like, gosh, you're struggling, look within and do that work within, and you'll see how he mirrors you back, how he reflects back that love, that energy. That's the most empowering thing about the practices that I did, was like, oh my gosh, it had nothing to do with the guys that I was attracting. It had everything to do with me. I didn't love myself. I was still seeking love outside of myself. And why? Because, well, I had only known conditional love. And what did that mean for me? What kind of conditions did I create for my worth? I had to be a certain way in order for me to be loved. I created stories, right? So, doing a lot of deep self reflection so that you're not in the same cycle. And you know what? Every little thing I worked through, I kept an eye on the kind of men I was attracting. I knew I was going to stay celibate and I'm not going to date, but I definitely allowed people to come to me. And every shift I would make, I would see that man was like a healed man. He was not this way, this way. It was like the men even I was attracting started to shift, but I knew they were not quite there yet. That was not still who I was, I was calling in. But what you're calling in, you have to actually become an energetic match for. And I realized I wanted to call in a king, And I had to define what that king meant, right? Because a king has a shadow side too. And then I had to define what does his queen is like and what her shadows are, and really like doing a lot of self reflection and deep dive into your being. Because this, here's the honest truth, like nobody can make you whole. That person that you're going to be with is going to be the cherry on top. Me and Matthew, my partner, we are like two trees side by side, holding the ground, so grounded, right? But he reflects back the level of groundedness I have. So I am the feminine manifestation of his inner feminine. And then I am, he is my, physical manifestation of my inner masculine. So every time I lose stability in myself, he reflects it. And every time he has a hard time being vulnerable, I'll go chaotic. So we are constantly in this like energetic war with each other. But now that I've learned what that means, him and I have such a great union. Like we don't fight, we know how to communicate, we know how to say like, I'm feeling these yucky feelings, can you hold space for me? And I may project those feelings to you. Do you mind if you like just like take it, just contain it, and like not take it personally? And then when I'm done, I'm like totally open for you to reflect back, and I will apologize to you, and I will hold space for you. So we have such a great way of communicating because we understand how me as a woman works and he as a man work, and how what both of our energies together are doing, because that's what really is. But the most empowering thing is that work is done within. So I would urge, anybody who's struggling with this is to like really dive deep. And again, you can have a healer help you kind of see your shadows, because shadows can be really hard to see. But you can just literally sit on a computer or a journal and write about, start with the complaining, the victim part, right? Like all the things you've gone through, all the men who've been shitty to you, right? And then go within and find the empowered queen that is truly you, the goddess within you, and ask yourself, how did you create that? Because you're the creator here, you're the God here. So, how did you create that? How did you make that happen? And then, how can you shift it? So, it is a really powerful practice. It's straight up feels like casting spells. So, once you really see it and feel it and experience it, things will not be the same anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. There's a lot there. So to caveat that a little bit, if you find yourself doing that and doing that inner work, and your partner is not like changing and changing with you and reflecting that, what does that look like? Just for people who, aren't in good relationships, what is that? How would you handle? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it then the universe is giving you a choice to make, and it's not always the easiest choice. So, for example, again, I'll use myself as an example. Um, when I started to heal and really take ownership, like take full ownership of everything I was creating, I noticed how my partner, my ex-husband, how he loved the victim version of me. So when I became empowered and started to take ownership, it completely triggered him. It's like as if he had no longer a purpose in my life. So and that meant the more closer I got to myself and God, the further he went, which was a huge indicator for how much this is no longer aligning. And I would use discernment, right? Have discernment and feel into the relationship that you're in and ask yourself, is this it for me? Does this serve my highest good and my lineage's highest goods and my kids' highest goods? And from there you are actually making a choice. And the further that partner goes away from you, actually is him already making a decision for you.
Mm.
And I'm not, telling people to get divorced or, all of that. But I know that people can make it work. You any relationship you can make it work, but both of them have to do that work. So me and my current partner, we both do the work equally. We both do it. So yes, we meet friction, but we both work at it. But when it's just one person and not the other, then yeah, the universe is actually communicating with you that maybe perhaps it's no longer serving you and it's no longer serving them. And the energy is no longer there. And the contract, it starts to kind of like break on its own. It's like you literally can't help but like watch it crumble. So have discernment, feel into it. Nobody can tell you what to do with it, but you have to see, like, are you in a position where you are empowered or not? I go back to that, like, is me choosing to be here, is me unconditionally loving myself and
Mm,
unconditionally loving my little girl inside of me. Now, if I have a very much a flight response, in that's my trauma response. When things get hard, I want to run away, right? So I go back to that. Like, does this serve my highest purpose? Now with my ex, yes, it did. Flight was the response. With the current one, it's like, no, no. I actually have to sit with the yucky feelings and stick with the crunchiness of it and have the courage to actually talk to him about my needs.
mm,
So that
beautiful.
can be really, really difficult. But yeah, having discernment.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. I asked that because um in Christianity so much is put on the wife and the woman to just pray about it. Just you do your work, you just keep serving God and he'll come along, he'll be converted by all of that. So I that's why I asked that because yeah, and you said it beautifully. So I love that. Yeah.
I guess in a way, Christianity is right? Like, do your work, pray about it, cast
Yeah.
your spells. And if, but the one part they're missing is that if when you're casting the spell, that person actually goes further away, that's
Mhm.
that's the internal, the God is within you is responding to your prayers.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
they do. That's where the big key is missed. And that's where it becomes abusive and that
Correct.
religious trauma because then women are staying and just praying and enduring so much suffering that is
Mm.
completely unnecessary. Yeah.
Yes. So true. My mom had such a hard time with my divorce, because
Mhm.
of religion purpose.
Yeah.
And even especially in Pakistan, as a woman, you can't even get a divorce. Like, the man has to choose into the divorce, otherwise you can't even get out. It's quite a fight. So I felt so, like, divorces, I realize, are such a beautiful gift that we have and such a freedom. And like, it can be, I have so much compassion for women who are tied to religions and have such a hard time, because I've been there. I had to look at my own mother and had to say the honest truth of, like, I know you put up with my father's abuse, but I will not. And I don't give a shit what book says, what any of the book, holy, sacred book said. My sacred book says to unconditionally love myself and get out of situations that literally harm me.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of
Exactly.
compassion there.
Yeah, and coming from Christianity, that's the conclusion I had come to when I went to leave my first husband was I don't care, I'm just getting out. I don't care, I'm done. And learning down the road different interpretations of the Bible then helped heal that wound a little bit, but then still going down the road, there was a lot there with healing from that. But yeah, it is it's so hard when that is all you know and what's ingrained in you to believe is truth and you're walking against all of that. Yeah, this is very
Yes.
brave of
I
you.
I commend you for even doing that, right? You said it best, like, it's walking against the grain while everybody's
Mhm.
shouting at you, like, this is not the way. It's not the
Yeah.
way. And you're like, no, I'm gonna choose myself. I'm
Mhm.
choosing myself, which, like, again, is demonized. To have self-pleasure, to choose yourself, it's like considered selfish. Like, we need to redefine selfish. Like,
Mhm.
what are we teaching our children by doing that? Right?
Yep.
Like, no,
Yep.
choose yourself. That is the highest form of love you can give to the world. Because when you're in that highest vibration of love within yourself and saying, man, I'm gonna choose me, what does that do to you and the world around you? It makes it a much better and safer place to be in. For our children, for our community, it really is. So I commend you for doing what you have done for your own freedom.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, same to you because you came from the same background, same
Mhm.
struggle. So yeah, we broke that for future generations. So I love it. Yeah. So I thank you so much for your time. I've taken up so much of your time and I so appreciate you being here and sharing everything you shared. But I'd still like for you to talk a little bit about, I know you hold some events. I know you have one this weekend, which this podcast will air later, but I've been super curious about it. So tell me about the work you do, how people can work with you. Yeah, the events you hold in person and online and all of that.
Sure. So I'm a healer and mystic, right? So I love the darkness, and that's where I support people. How to not be afraid of that. I support specifically women, but actually I've had a lot of men reach out. So I'm like having to like shift a lot of things. A lot of men have been reaching out, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is beautiful. And I have no fucking idea how to help you. But I'm figuring out how to like create spaces for them. So I do a lot of well, this weekend specifically I'm doing a sacred rage ceremony. It's gonna be beautiful, and actually a lot of men are also coming. It's going to be really powerful. And I hold them in person and also online. And then I'm launching a new, because of the interest in this kind of ceremonies, I realize it's kind of all over the place. So I have a wait list for a membership that I'm opening up, and it's going to be the path of the feminine. And it's guiding women through their internal, actually women and men in through their internal cycles, and then the cycles of this the actual season we live in, how to use the earth that's around us, right, the land that we're actually on. Like you might be in the different part of the world and I'm different, and that serves us differently. How to actually like learn to connect with your inner wisdom and return back to nature essentially. So I'll guide through the spiritual work as far as like how to do shamanic journey into doing your inner child healing and connecting with your spirit guides, connecting with um your spirit animals. So it's going to be really, really powerful. Is We're going to be working with like the four directions. So really is the path of the feminine is also the path of the shaman. So anybody who is interested, like that's really the most, it's going to be so beautiful because I'll be going month by month as astrologically things are changing. I'll go month by month as the seasons are shifting and what that's doing for us. For example, like in winter, people have the hardest time in winter, when really that's the perfect time to do shadow work. That is literally, winter is designed for us to do shadow work. So I will be providing all the support throughout summer and spring and different internal seasons we go through, so you can learn to harness and come back to your wholeness, connecting to nature. So that's what the membership is. And I also have soul transformational healing sessions, which is one-on-one support for, I do one sessions, and then I also do 6 month and 12-month containers, so that those are really, really powerful. Like I highly recommend people to do like longer containers, because for example, you're going through like divorce, like that's one session is not going to do anything with you. But because I've had a lot of experience in doing somatic work and shamanic work, what we do is like hold hand each other, with my client, and walk side by side through the darkness until they can find that light within themselves and come back to their wholeness. And my goal with these sessions is that they have enough tools that they're good on their own. That's really the goal of that. And I do ceremonies. I work with combo medicine, which is a warrior medicine from the jungle, and that has been a huge part of what I do. And I'm actually going to Costa Rica to do an all women combo ceremony. It's going to be really, really powerful. So loads of offerings, all connected with the divine feminine path. And I specifically put it out to the world, to your viewers, who are especially women who are in their masculine and want to return back to their wholeness. So not shedding the masculine aspect of them, because no, that's beautiful. You want to keep that, right? That's sacred too. But bring back the imbalance and come back into the divine feminine, and really come back to, their feminine essence. Like that is my gift to the world. That is what I do. And I am honored to walk that path. I also have a podcast. It's called Her Story Podcast. And in about 7-8 months, I'll be transitioning into more of sexual healing. That is, yeah, I slightly kind of brushed over it, but I was sexually abused a lot as a little girl. And that has allowed me to walk the path of a high priestess. So I will be sharing a lot of work around sexual empowerment and how to connect to your pussies, and actually um, use that wound that you have and alchemize it into your unique gifts into this world. So lots of things, I'm sure. Um, I'm a channeler, so there's always new creations that I'm birthing. So I would love for you guys to follow me along, and like if the work resonates, like absolutely, I would love to have you be part of my community.
Awesome, beautiful. And I love how you included that in finding your wholeness and not shedding that masculinity, because
Mhm.
I know for my viewers who are, in that they there's so much about being in that fuck you mentality. I'm a woman, and like it's such an imbalance. And or being the one like, oh, I just want to be the one where, he takes care of this and all things. And
Yeah.
that's not healthy either. It is a wholeness. There is
Yes.
balance. And that's
Yes.
so it's beautiful that how you said that. So how can people get in touch with you, follow you on social medias? Where do you love to connect with them?
I am pretty much on every platform now. Um, my name is Rimsha Warda, so that's all my, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the places, and my website is also called rimshawarda.com. So if you look that up, you'll find it. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's just put my name, you'll find it.
Awesome. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was, I mean, just words don't do justice. So you shared so much and I really appreciate that. So
Thank you so much for having me here.
yeah, of course. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you for joining us today on the Fierce Voice podcast. I truly hope you found healing insights, tools, and a space held for you in this journey. We are all in this together and you are not alone. You can find me, your host, Brigette Gildemaster, on all social media platforms, and check out my website at www.brigittegildemaster.com, where you can listen to past Fierce Voice episodes, check out my media features, find my books, and inquire about booking me for your next virtual or in-person event. My keynotes are impactful with real-life stories, actionable tools, and inspiration for healing after a life-altering experience. Or check out my workshop event to learn more about how you can prevent abuse in your area. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you next time on the Fierce Voice Podcast.